Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast, the sibling podcast to the popular weekly title. We're back after a bit of a hiatus following some very jumbled weeks, and for some reason we've decided to bring this back in a 3-day working week for us, which is kind of a bit of a sensible choice. 'Cause obviously, we've got Friday missing with a bank holiday, Monday missing with a bank holiday, which gave us 3 days to produce this week's issue, but we've found time for a podcast on top of it. I'm this week's host, Jesse Billington, and I'm joined by our deputy editor, Chris Hope.
Hello.
And our content editor, James Peen.
Ahoy.
Gents, we'll kick off as we usually do with an Our Classics catch up. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. Have we got an update from anyone?
You know that thing you were just saying about a 3-day week and the production squeezers?
You haven't had a chance.
James, you have an update. You can talk about some progress on the Beetle.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a massive amount. It sounds like gardening work, but I managed to clear my workspace. So I removed about 2 tons of compost from a compost heap next to my car, which every time it rained, it was like just turning the ground green and filthy. So I moved that, jet washed the beetle off, got rid of all the green, the mold, cleaned the cobwebs out. I don't like spiders at the best of times, and I've been buying parts. So
Okay.
things are happening. I mean, when I first put it on the road to move it when I moved house, coming up to 3 years ago, I cut down some wheel bolts just to fit my my adapters, and I was never happy about that. So I've now got some studs to put on. I bought all new bolts for that, nuts and bolts. Bought some vintage seat belts, which is very, very nice, very cool. Baco ones, which I've never seen before. The guy was advertising on eBay saying, yeah, these are a rare Volkswagen accessory. Tracking them down, yeah, they were 20 quid, and they're proper inertia seat belts. So
It's a
yeah,
proper hidden gem type idea. So you got some
yes.
you got some bits from the Resto Show as well, you mentioned.
Oh, I found a really cool Marshall spotlight for the front end as well, which was again a 20 quid bargain. It's one of those things, when you're at the NEC show and you go to a stand and you say, how much is this? And you've already got an excuse to say, well, I'll come back and I'll think about it. And then when he said 20 quid, I couldn't literally pay him quick enough. So yeah, that should probably
At which point the vendor goes, whoops, I've made a mistake here.
yeah. So now it's cool. It's got the mounting bracket and everything, even got a bulb. So and it worked. So
Wow.
as I say, things are sort of slowly coming in. So there's like a bigger pile going into the car. So
Yeah,
hopefully over Easter I'll get out and I'll get a few bits sorted on it.
very
Nice.
good.
Yeah.
It's all go for you, Jesse.
Well, I mean, yeah, the MG was sort of has been pretty active all the way through March, really. I think we barely recorded a podcast in March. So, yeah, I think I had it down in London for a classic car meet on the 1st of March, drove it home, and then the next day drove it up to the PC workshop to do the special podcast episode from there.
Yeah.
And then Jimny failed its MOT, so it was then sort of thrust into just daily use at that point.
It failed its MOT, but it didn't really fail its MOT, did it? It was handbrake, what you said, wasn't it?
Yeah, I ended up replacing the handbrake cables on that, and for a second time, or sort of every year now, I have to go back into the rear brakes and basically rebuild them, just to sort of properly adjust them and get them all tensioned down. So that was, yeah, I think, what was it? We'd been up shooting the SD1 and Granada that's coming up in the next issue. And I was on the way home from that and got a phone call saying, bad news, it's failed its MOT. So I was like, great.
Yeah.
Bought a set of handbrake cables because it was just the handbrake that wasn't reaching standard. And I knew that it had sort of limped through its MOT last year on that. And the adjuster nut at the bottom of the handbrake sort of arm itself was at its full adjust. So, yeah, 2 new handbrake cables from the Jimny Parts website. Had them shipped up immediately, fitted them on the sun. So literally went to the Resto Show in the MG, came home on Saturday night, Sunday fitted the handbrake cables, and got it MOT'd or retested again on the Monday, and it's past that now. So that's all good. And then immediately loaded the car up on the Tuesday night to drive on Wednesday all the way up to Scotland to go and do 3 peaks.
Yep.
So yeah, there hasn't
It's
been
not like cutting it fine or anything, no.
No, just sort of sending a message to my mates who I was doing the trip with of the car on axle stands in the workshop with no rear end to it, just sort of going, this is fine. It'll be ready by Wednesday with a legal MOT on it. And they're like, why have you left it so late? I was like, kind of assumed that it would pass its MOT the first time round. This bit wasn't part of the plan, but
Also, cycle back to all of the work that we need to do to put the paper together.
yes, yeah, so fitting that in around sort of doing all of my stuff in 2 days before disappearing for 3 days. So it was, yeah, very flat out week plus obviously work on top of it. So it was, yeah, scuffed fingers, dirt under the nails again as usual, and then got it all built up. Picked up Dan and Jacob from Oswestry and then bombed it all the way up to Fort William. Snow on the ground in Fort William, so glad we'd taken the Jimny for that. And then, yeah, it's surprising how much 3 people and hiking gear you can fit into a Suzuki at any given point in time. It was packed to the gunnels. Like if you're sat in the rear seat, you're sort of cocooned in by window and then just rucksacks next to you. But yeah, we quickly knocked the idea of doing the 3 peaks in 24 hours on the head about halfway up Ben Nevis because we went, this is going to be A, exhausting, B, not a lot of fun, and C, we're a long way behind schedule and we're only halfway up Ben Nevis because
Yeah. What was the plans for your friends to share driving, or would you been doing the lot?
we did share driving in the end, actually. Jacob and Dan shared the leg up, the centre of the sort of bomb it straight up to Fort William. They shared bits and pieces of that. So they did we all did about 2.5 hours each behind the wheel. And they said it's fine to drive as a car. They're like, it's relatively unremarkable and was.
I'm going to say, you can't get upset at the
Yeah.
Jimny. It is what it is.
Yeah, so that's high praise indeed. I'll probably get a stronger sentence from them for a future Hour Classics, sort of like a review in a sentence. But yeah, it performed very well, did the car, and it was great fun on the way out of the Lake District. So sort of Nevis, snow up to our waist at the summit of it, came back down. There's a lovely pub at the bottom of Ben Nevis, the Ben Nevis Inn. They do a very nice ale. We had a bowl of chips and a beer to warm up, and then got back in the car and bombed it down to the lakes. Stopped for dinner in Cockermouth, and then actually got into sort of Westdale and everything around there. Hostel, woke up the next morning, glorious sunshine. So we've got this great shot of the 3 of us with the car by the lakeside, like perfect Lake District weather. Ascent for that was great, and then by that point, as we're leaving the lakes, because you're right in the middle of it for doing Scarfell, you have to drive through sort of the stunning Lake District sort of scenery at sunset, and it was just fantastic. And which I think I chucked on like my driving tunes playlist or something for this bit, just to sort of listen to some bits and pieces, just as we're sort of driving and yapping through the lakes. And I think it was what's the one from last night, the proms? Essentially, sort of this swelling piece of classical music comes on as we sort of press this sort of sunlit ride over sort of lakes and drop into the sort of absolutely stunning valley. Pomp and Circumstance is the track, and you're just sort of thinking, "Oh, this is nice." And yeah, then sort of arrive in Oswestry hotel for the night, and then did Snowdon the next day. And yeah, all the way through, the car never put a foot wrong. An endlessly practical classic car, even if it did try and cut it a bit fine with the handbrake. But the MG is still running very well. It needs a clean because essentially it was been used and abused all the way through March and is showing a bit of road grot on it at the moment. But I've decided to put off cleaning it, and instead I'm going to tear apart the front suspension. Ordered parts on Monday with a friend at Moss Rimmer, and they're being shipped. They should be here hopefully today. And then I plan to use the bank holiday weekend to essentially sort of completely overhaul the front end suspension wise. So trunnions, I think I've got shocks and springs going in, and obviously poly bushes as well, just to try and tighten the front end up. So yeah, we should be all right come Tuesday, and hopefully have 2 cars that work and drive a lot better.
I'm jealous of the space that you've got to do these things.
The space and the time, I think, is the other bit. I have no one else to deal with in my life apart from me, so I sort of have an endless resource of time, and yeah, might as well. I've got nothing else going on over a bank holiday weekend.
Make the most of it before you settle down.
Yeah, that'll all stop once kids come along. Forget about it.
Yeah, hopefully we've got a little bit longer before that all becomes an issue. But yeah, obviously we haven't recorded a podcast in a little while. So we'll go back to the Resto Show. James, you've already mentioned it with sort of you picking up some bits and pieces while you were there. What were the sort of behind the scenes bits that sort of stood out from the weekend, the favourite moments of putting together the issue? Because obviously we'd done remarkably well with preloading a lot of that issue with stuff. So we actually got a chance to enjoy the show a bit more. I don't know if there's anything that stood out for either of you.
I think it's just a case of getting out and meeting people. You know, there's so many clubs there. And I obviously, when you guys go before the rest of us turn up, the scouts go out and they find all these sites, people to go and speak to, and then you say, "Yo, go and speak to this chap, go and speak to this club," and then you go off, and then invariably you end up spending probably about 45 minutes talking to somebody about a really obscure car that possibly you might not have been that interested in, but then you discover there's like a really cool club, there's a really cool story behind the car, and it just goes like that. Like everyone you speak to is really happy to chat, I think, at that show. And you just talk to so many different people, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. We're all sort of probably on the spectrum in some respects, but we're all just sort of like dialed into our particular car. And it's just, as I say, we're all the same, but everyone's got something different to talk about. And I enjoy getting out and talking to people. And as I say, someone will say to you, "Go and talk to this bloke," but it's not a quick 5 minutes, get this news story, get back, write it up in the press. It's like you'll be gone for an hour. But it is what it is, and it's always fun, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I enjoyed just catching up with the people who'd helped me out more than anything else in the run-up. So I was able to meet the owner of the Renault Aventine that was in our Resto Show issue. Was able to get to see because that was a Dynamique, so it is the 2-liter turbo rather than the 3-liter V6. So I was able to see the 3-liter V6 and see how that differed, sort of thing. So that was quite cool. But no, you're absolutely right. We Friday for me was quite sort of laser focused on just almost tunnel vision to the people that I needed to speak to for the event coverage that we decided upon, and Saturday was a little bit more laid back. You and I, Jesse, plus our photographer James Sadlier, took a bit more sort of a lazier approach of just sort of going around and grabbing some photos of the coverage that we needed, but also some of the bits and pieces as well, some owner stories and things like that. And it was just nice just to sort of take a slightly sort of more sedate pace and go around, sort of thing. It is a smaller show than the November Classic Motor Show. However, I think you do tend to spend more time on individual stands for the reasons James just sort of said, and that's not even from sort of like a journalistic perspective. I think that you can wander around the show even in a day at the start of the day, and what you find on a given stand later that afternoon is different because of the work that they're doing and the progress that's been made. So it's always worth going around twice. So you almost sort of double the size of the show that way, sort of thing, because you'll have chatted to the person on a given stand about what they're doing, and you return later to see how they've got on and chat about what's gone wrong and what's gone right, and hopes for sort of getting the car running and having it drive out, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, there was so many stories of this is an car that has not moved in an number of decades, and we're going to make sure that it's turning over and drives off out of its own steam, because for all you might not have a roadworthy car insofar as you're not able to sort of drive it home, there's plenty of people that use it as an opportunity to say that the engine's going to run and it's going to move under its own steam to get out of the hall, which is private roads, so therefore we can absolutely do that sort of thing. And it's just crazy to think that these are cars that will have not moved in absolutely sort of ages, years, decades, sort of thing. The Allegro Club International was one example. They had a 1750 SS, one of a handful of sort of survivors. Chatting to the custodian of that car, because it has passed within the club and has sort of been deferred, and there's been plans to get it going but never quite got there, sort of thing. But they've been amassed as a group enough parts now whereby they can sort of move forward with that work. And yeah, not started in decades, and drove out of that hall back onto a trailer, albeit, but drove out of that hall under its own steam. I think that's just amazing. So
Yeah, I think there was a Morris Marina that went through the same process as well. It was a coupe that had been off the road for sort of 20, 30 years almost. And they said it probably won't be driving away from the end of the show, but we don't even know if this engine turns over. So our goal is to try and get this engine sort of running and moving.
You can't underestimate the what you get from sort of seeing it, it spurs you on to do the rest of it. Once you know that you've driven it out of that hole and you've made the progress that the hard graft that you're putting in the 3 days, it encourages you to keep going. That's what I get the vibe from a lot of the club sort of thing. So that if something has stalled, then taking it to the Resto Show and spending 3 days working on it, because yeah, I mean, you've got your car on the stand. You feel obliged to sort of do it. You got these tens of thousands of visitors watching your every move. I think you've been there, Jesse. You've had a car on the stand, sort of thing. You don't feel like you can stop for a moment. You got to keep going, sort of thing. So once you put in all that effort, I think it really does spur these clubs and these cars to see it through to fruition, sort of thing. It just gives that real sort of kick up the backside.
Yeah, you're under the spotlight for 3 days solid, working away on your car. So there is this sort of expectation that for 3 days you are working on your car. And equally, you go to it going, oh, great, I've got 3 days to work on my car. So it sort of comes at it from both angles. And it gives you this great head of steam when it comes to actually doing things and projects that you've been delaying. Like with mine, finally gave me the chance to fit a new steering wheel, to do the brakes on the car, just sort of do a load of bits and pieces that I'd sort of been deferring doing, and eventually we just sort of pulled the trigger on it and went, right, well, I've got a bunch of people around that can give me a hand, sort of crack on with this and do it. And yeah, it was a great chance to do things that I'd never sort of.
And that's the thing as well. I mean, it's not a case with all the club stands. Some of the smaller stands, there might be only one or two cars and the same number of people, but something like your situation with the Midget and Sprite Club, dozens of people, half a dozen cars. There's always someone on hand to give you a hand, even if it is just to help you out with a few bits and pieces, stand on a brake pedal while you do something. There's not that impediment that you might have at home where you're having to call your better half out, sort of thing, for whatever she's doing to do something. And it's that kind of idea as well. So it's the perfect opportunity to make some real headway. And yeah, you do see that especially over the course of 3 days, if you are there 3 days, sort of thing. So but yeah, Sunday's definitely the day to be there, sort of thing, and see all these things that have happened, and they can tell you about the highs and lows and what went right and what went wrong. Definitely worth it.
Yeah, I'll never forget the frenzied rebuild of the brakes in sort of like the final hour and a half of the Sunday show, because we had maybe 8 people working on my car all at the same time, just in this desperation to get it sort of back off of its stands and back so I could drive it home with some front brakes. And it's sort of, if you watch, if you ever see like an F1 car crash during a practice session, they're desperate to try and get it back out. And the fact that you have sort of like just this swarm of people working on it, rebuilding sort of a front suspension component. It was very similar to that. It was sort of like 3 people gathered at each end and sort of people running backwards and forwards with tools and parts, and then sort of one person bleeding out, bleeding out, bleeding out, and it's sort of like, this is really quite fun in a sort of panicked, desperate way. But no,
you don't want to be that club that's got some high-vis jackets coming over to you and tapping a watch on their wrist, do you? So
yeah, sort of going, we finished it fine. Being sort of like nearly. But yeah, it's good fun. I do always enjoy the Resto Show for that sort of live element to it. There is that bit of sort of jeopardy to it that isn't manufactured for a lot of people as well, because that's just sort of the hurdles you run into working on an old car, is something inevitably goes wrong at some point. And
that is as well for all that certain clubs are there year in, year out. There is a rotation of new clubs. There was clubs at that event that haven't been there before. Aventine Alliance is a prime example of that. It's an offshoot of the Matcha Enthusiast Club, but they've not been there because, I mean, the reason they were there was for the anniversary. It's 25 years since the launch of the Aventine. But even those clubs that are there year in, year out, I think they find themselves wanting to do more and more ambitious things. So that if anything, if it is like a larger club, a club that's there, that's frequently there, all it does is mean that they're really sort of pushing the boundaries of what you can actually do in 3 days, sort of thing. So
yeah, Jowett's a big one for that. The fact that they've always got sort of like 3 or 4. I think this time they had like nearly 6 Bradfords being worked on at any point in time, and the sort of range of processes and projects that were going on. You're sort of going, I know that none of these are expecting to drive away from here, but this is a lot of work to try and get done. days. And yeah, I always used to love watching the old Roadkill TV series old YouTube series rather. I loved it when they'd go to like SEMA and do a build at SEMA. They usually do like an engine swap or something. I think they did it with what was called the Crusher Camaro, 69 yellow Camaro. And I loved the fact that they had to sort of literally they had 3 days to rip out an old 350 and then drop in a brand new sort of crate motor, get it all plumbed in. And it was this sort of genuine sort of jeopardy of it, thinking, oh, that's so fun. Wouldn't it be fun to do that? And then you do it at a show and you go, this is actually a lot more stressful than I initially anticipated. But it's great fun and the camaraderie of it's good as well. And like you said, it's nice catching up with the people that have helped us make the issue as well. Because I got a chance to chat with the new chairman at Sporting Bears, and sort of part of the thing we wrote in the interview was they were looking forward to at some point this year celebrating raising £4 million. What they didn't anticipate was having such a good turnout at the Resto Show that they actually hit the 4 million at the Resto Show. They knew it was going to come later in the year, but then they sort of totted up the mass as they were going along. Like, the next person to book a ride is going to be the £4 million sort of raised.
Yeah.
So they were able to like tie it all in and get the person who booked the £4 million ride with sort of Mike Brewer and do sort of a full celebration there, which is see the fact they sort of almost sort of overreached their expectations and proper chance to celebrate this huge milestone of £4 million raised for children's charities. And yeah, it was one of those moments where you sort of go, this is nice. This is what the car community is about, is sort of coming together, doing nice things beyond our own sort of good as well, which is positive.
It might just be me having done this for years now, but it doesn't seem that long ago that they were celebrating the milestone for 3 million. So I think they've got a real head of steam currently. So
I remember shooting their 3 million with James Sadlier at the NEC. I can't remember if it was for a Resto Show or the Classic Motor Show. I think it might have been the Resto Show because I remember it being springtime about 2 years ago. The growth that club has seen, its ability to raise money over time, has been phenomenal. And then sort of they've just already made it to 4, and you're like, that's really impressive.
We should offer a Sporting Bears riding Jesse's midget.
I don't think it'd be particularly exciting. Maybe it will be once I've done the front suspension. It'll be a bit more sort of dynamic and worthy of a dream ride, as opposed to at the moment, you'd have more fun if you took one of their Cadillacs that sometimes rocks up to a Sporting Bears ride out, because it is a bit puddingy. But
I think they were saying that their most popular car that weekend was the DeLorean. By quite a long way. Yeah.
But I mean, it's an eye-catching, head-turning car. It is a proper dream ride for everyone, and obviously because of its sort of film sort of connotation as well. And they're interesting.
I don't think that I've seen a DeLorean at the Resto Show or Motor Show though, so that there's perhaps a little bit of that as well. Maybe.
I've seen.
I do tend to swing by the paddocks fairly regularly, and I don't remember seeing that in their lineups previously.
There's definitely been a DeLorean at the show, but I don't think there's been one there with the Sporting Bears. It might have been a first time for them, but who knows?
It's probably worth pointing out what they do. So at the Resto Show, they have what they call the Dream Drive paddock, and you're able to see this wide array of cars, maybe sort of 40, 50 cars, something like that. And in exchange for a charitable donation, you're able to have a ride in said car, and it's the dream sort of aspect. Encompasses the proper dream sort of cars as the DeLorean and various supercars and things like that. But there is sort of a nostalgic sort of dad's car element to it as well, where it stretches to those cars that you might sort of remember sort of growing up with, and you can have a ride in that as well, sort of thing. So but yeah, it's another element to the Resto Show, albeit one that's shared with the Motor Show, and Sporting Bears appear at various other sort of events, national events throughout the calendar as well. But it's another thing where you can just sort of get behind, get inside of a really quite exciting classic and have a ride around the various access roads. And did they go out onto the main roads? Did they? I can't remember. They go.
Like, I think it's sort of like almost a half-hour sort of drive in it. So they do sort of leave the NEC confines and go on like a proper route round. I think it sort of immediately sort of tries to cut away from the NEC and head sort of south almost to sort of like Knoll and things now into a bit of countryside. So you get like a B road sort of blast to sort of enjoy being in the car, and then sort of obviously brings you back into the NEC and drops you off again. But yeah, it's one of those really sort of dynamic and just positive elements that sort of forms part of the weekend. And it's I've never either done one or sort of partaken in one. So it'd be interesting to do at some point. I know, wasn't Richard McCann, one of our regular contributors, done it at some point, I think.
We looked into it, and for a variety of reasons, none of which are the fault of the club, we weren't able to make that work. So we definitely want to pursue it again, sort of thing. And I think yeah, be it him or you, I think it would be really interesting for readers to sort of see what it is behind the scenes. And then obviously, assuming that it is a positive experience, and I can't see why it wouldn't be, that's the sort of thing we'd like to share and would hopefully sort of bolster the numbers of the club even further.
Something we can look at for a future issue, maybe. Keep your eyes peeled for that as we move forwards. But and I think it was on the whole a really good Resto show, and certainly one of the. It's been busy as well. Like there was crowds waiting to get in on sort of all days, which is always sort of a good sign. People are there and eager to get through the front door at 9 a.m. most days. And yeah, I think on the whole, a great way to sort of almost start the show season as well. Sort of, it's one of those things that sort of really marks sort of the proper sort of run into the big summer season of shows, and it's always that sort of moment you go, okay, I think we're on for a good year again when you look at the attendance and what's going on. But we'll move on from the previous issue to the one that's actually out at the moment, and we've been looking back and celebrating touring cars, and certainly the British touring car season, which is about to get underway. And we've been, as a team, sort of looking back and picking sort of our favourites from years gone by. And there's some interesting picks in the group, but I think there's also a few that have sort of missed out on getting mentioned as well, which is quite interesting. So, Chris, you sort of put this feature together. I'll let you kick off with this one.
Yeah, so we're using the British Touring Car Championship and its new season, which I'm just going to quickly grab the date because it's the 18th, 19th of April. So it's a couple of weekends time away, sort of thing still, but it is coming. And one of our colleagues, Michael Kaplan, our production editor, he noted that there's a sort of a double header of anniversaries for both the BMW M3 and the Ford RS Cosworth, sort of thing. So we were able to gather together a couple of cars to sort of see what they were like, sort of thing. So we got an M3 Evo 2, and an RS 500 Cosworth. So quite interesting insofar as these were sort of both they're all homologation specials, but because they're revisions, they rather than having to do like the 5,000, they only had to do like 500 under the Evolution sort of tag. So we drove both of those cars, and that was a really interesting feature. But we thought we'd take it further, and we just opened it up to the entire team of just sort of, for whatever reason, what are your favorite sort of touring cars throughout the year? So I picked the Hillman Imp, and you're talking about cars that have been omitted. Well, I very clearly sort of ignored the Mini in choosing the Imp, but I think that the Imp was worth sort of looking at, given that it was 3 years on the bounce that it was able to take the championship driver's title. Bill McGovern sort of the blue liveried sort of car has been quite iconic. But yeah, very the when you think about British touring cars, and when you think about St Mary's Trophy in particular, you think about those David and Goliath sort of battles between minis and pretty much everything else that's bigger than it. I know that, James, you picked sort of the biggest of the big for your choice, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously went for the Ford Galaxy, just because it's a monster. It's one of those cars that whenever you see it, it's now Goodwood Revival, I have to stop and look at it, and then when it fires up, you feel it. It's such a big old lump, isn't it? And as I think I wrote in my piece, that I love seeing it blasting down the straight, but then having a Mini hanging off the back end of it as it's going around the twisty bits. It's kind of like David and Goliath. That's one of my favourite sort of touring cars by a mile. But I think my ultimate choice was the Volvo Estate, because that was totally the era that I was watching motorsport, and I just remember thinking that's actually a really cool car, and it's a Volvo Estate. I mean, when was the last time you saw a cool Volvo Estate anywhere?
Volvo don't even make the estates anymore. Or saloon cars, if anything. They just do SUVs, which is sort of the sad fact of it. But yeah, the Volvo, the 850, because they also had the really trick slant head to them as well to improve airflow through it. It was sort of like a production thing they brought in purely to compete in BTCC at the time. And yeah, the Flying Brick, there's all those great shots of it on two wheels sort of bouncing around Alton Park. I absolutely love them as a as a choice of car. I mean, for my picks, I went for the Riley 1.5, which never had a strong showing in BTCC, or at the time it was British Saloon Car Championships, the earlier version of it. But it was the car that decided that inaugural championship as well,
Yep.
because I think it was Sopwith and Sears that were tied on points come the end of the final round at Brands Hatch.
It was.
Then said, well, why don't you just do a head-to-head in, I don't know, here's two factory-prepared rally cars around the circuit, 5 laps, swap cars, 5 laps, and we'll sort of see who's got the shortest combined time. And it was the rally-prepared 1.5s that sort of decided it. And you still see them again on the classic sort of touring car scene, still sort of beansing it around. And they're really hot little motors actually as well. You can take that B series engine quite a long way. I know Oxford University Motorsports have got a couple of, I think they've certainly got at least one. I think they've just somehow ended up with a second 1.5 that they've got this sort of mystery camshaft in that has an incredible idle to it. And it sounds brilliant. I'm like, I could really enjoy a very sporty tuned 1.5. And I think the other pick I went for was the Dolomite Sprint as well, which I'd absolutely love. And I've always sort of lusted after one from the old Top Gear episode where it was could you and should you buy British Leyland cars for under £1,500? And one of the cars they picked up was a Dolly Sprint, and I was like, you can't buy a Dolly Sprint for under £1,500 for love nor money these days. And if you do, it's mostly made up of Kellogg Special K underneath.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that it sort of sits almost in sort of dream car, absolutely aspirational levels of want, because they're just such sweet little things and incredibly, really quite racy actually compared to what else was being produced at its time. They were almost the hot hatch of its period. So yeah, they
Well,
were.
I think it's telling that when you look through sort of the period road tests and even sort of the classic sort of magazines, it's always sort of gets paired against the Neue Klasse and sometimes even sort of the 2002 Ti sort of thing. So one, just an astronomical amount of money gulf between them sort of thing. For all the Dolomite isn't cheap, it is in the context of that car sort of thing. So I think it is even now that prices are well sort of beyond that 10 grand mark, I think it still has that affordability aspect to it when you look at, well, what else can I buy in that guise, in that mold sort of thing. So
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I mean, there's a couple of cars that I was surprised didn't make the cut. BMW 318S or IS, I think it was.
yeah, we already had a BMW the previous ages. I think it's the same with I wanted to include sort of Mark I Cortinas and things like that as well, but because we'd already talked about the Sierra in the previous, I know they're not the same cars, but it's the same manufacturer, and we try to, in any given issue, we do try to sort of get as many makes and models in as we can, sort of thing. So.
And the Mustang as well, which I think Roy Pierpont won on his debut year in the championship with a Mustang. But obviously, we've already got the Galaxy in there, which is another big sort of American pounding V8. Both of them really interesting cars. And the BM only won in '92 because I think it was Steve Soper wiped out John Cleland, who was in the Vauxhall, which does get mentioned actually in the piece. And it's one of those things where you go, these cars have, or certainly the seasons always seem to have this absolute firecracker ending to them, whether it either goes down to sort of a Riley 1.5 shootout, or it's down to literally your teammate wiping out your closest championship rival. And I think in the case of it would have been, I wrote it down, Tim Harvey in '92 managed to sort of take the win purely because John Cleland had been wiped out by Steve Soper. John Cleland in the Cavalier, famous for that great piece of Murray Walker commentary of, I think he's going for first, says Cleland, and it's clearly him gesticulating wildly and inappropriately at the car ahead of him at Silverstone. If you've never seen that clip, I recommend finding it. And it's a brilliant piece of Murray Walker commentary and more proof to John Cleland's often irate driving on a circuit, let's say.
I think the only reason the Mustang didn't make the list is we all expected you to pick it, so we all shied away from it.
That's also true. So I sort of shot myself in the foot with that one and picked two things that were sort of, if anything, kind of the opposite. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have done that. But yeah, I think the Mustang was just an interesting one because it was this weird influx of American saloons that rocked up to do the British Saloon Car Championship, and everyone was like, okay, but you've seen that these are tight, complex little circuits like Brands Hatch, Alton Park, Snetterton. They're not big sort of American style, super wide, big long straights. Is this going to work? And if you've ever seen a Ford Galaxy fly around Brands Hatch, it's damned impressive. I think the Mustang makes a bit more sense because it's a bit smaller, but even then, it's when you look at, again, compared to things like 1.5s, Minis, Dolomites, it's a big car. It's a lot of car to try and muscle through sort of clearways, but good fun. And obviously, if you want classic saloon car racing, there is the Classic Saloon Car Racing Club, which does host, I think, a number of grids from the 50s, 60s, all the way through to, I think, Super Touring as well at the moment. So they've got a full range of them. There's Super Touring Power Return to Brands Hatch in, I want to say it's either July or August. I know that Retro Rides Weekender at Goodwood has got display of Super Touring cars, as does Members Meeting. There's a huge revival for sort of classic touring car racing at the moment. And last weekend at Donington was the first round of the classic touring car racing series as well. So they had all the cars we've really spoken about going back to the circuit and duking it out. And I think we've got more heading along for the Donington Historic Festival as well. I know they've got a period raced, it's a Holden Commodore heading along as well as part of one of its tin top touring car grids. So there's some really great action that's sort of still being revived and enjoyed in sort of moving motor shows when it comes to the saloon car stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, but no, it's a really interesting feature. And again, if you like your British saloon car racing, your touring cars, worth picking up the latest issue to read, and sort of almost tied in. I can't remember if the Alpha 164 ever did touring car racing, or if that was preserved for the 155 before it. But obviously that's the buying guide in the current issue. Really interesting car, that, and a really interesting way of getting into alphas for not a lot of money, I think. But you've a lot of risks to take there as well. Buy wisely. Elsewhere in the current issue, I can't remember, what's the lead story, James, that you've put together for the current issue that's out?
An issue. That's just like childbirth, isn't it? You push them out and forget about them. What we got? 2 seconds. I'll tell you what, we do have a very interesting story for the buying opener. We have the from the Resto Show again, actually, which was the chap with his £3,000 Mercedes, which a lot of people seem to think was a 20 to 30 grand car, which was a very interesting take on that. So we looked into what you can buy for the money that seems to show you a lot wealthier than you actually are. So yeah, more bang for your buck. Classics. That's quite an interesting one for the buying opener.
Yeah,
and then
£300.
£3,000.
What? That's absurd. For a CL500, that's mental.
Yeah.
That's a lot of...
No,
that's...
there we go. Save. And then, I can't remember, what was our lead for this issue?
Here we go, found it. It was the War Threatens Classic Spending. So this was the early sort of iterants of the this is the right issue? Yes, essentially sort of the ongoing sort of price increases that could be a bit of a hurdle for classic fans and restoration shops and showrooms and so on and so forth. So obviously a tricky one.
Yeah, this is the one that David wrote, which is why I don't have it on my system. So there we go.
They are one from David, but no, there's a lot to look forward to and enjoy in the latest issue, which is out now. Obviously, as we mentioned, we've been working away, so there will be a fresh issue out next week as well, regardless of the bank holidays. So plenty more still to come from us. In the meantime, anything else to add in, guys?
No, don't think so.
Crack on and head for Easter.
We'll be back after having eaten our body weights in Easter eggs and mini eggs, I suppose, in a few short days. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back with another edition of the podcast and another issue of Classic Car Weekly in a few short days, unsurprisingly.